I don't know if you've seen my other chats, but it's hard to talk about this part of the story without getting emotional. How it went down for me was my mom was the first one to sort of like leave Scientology. But she didn't want to get kicked out of Scientology. She just wanted to sort of fix what was wrong with it. And she eventually got officially kicked out for just running her mouth negatively about David Miscavige to people she should not have been doing that to, right? Now in Scientology, when someone gets kicked out, you have to completely sever all ties with them, right? So that's called disconnection. I know I said my mom and I don't have a great relationship right now, but we were very, very close. So realize at this point, it's me and my wife. My wife's parents have been in Scientology forever. My wife's two sisters and brother are in Scientology. Their spouses are in Scientology. All their kids are in Scientology. My little brother's in Scientology. Scientology's everywhere. I work for a Scientologist. She works for a Scientologist. All that kind of stuff. So Scientology tells me that me and my wife and my kids have to disconnect from my mom completely or we're going to get kicked out.
So you leave the Sea Org and now what happens?
Okay. So...
And how old are you? 26 now? Something like that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. We are still Scientologists at this point. And we're just ex-Sea Org members, but still Scientologists.
You're not questioning anything at this point, really,
No.
you'd say?
So this is 2006. Life goes on pretty much as normal until 2009, when the Tampa Bay Times starts publishing these interviews of these high-level executives who had all not just left the Sea Org, but actually left Scientology. And these were executives who worked directly with David Miscavige, and many of them had also worked directly with L. Ron Hubbard. And this is where things start to get interesting, because I go, we said earlier, how could anything be more important than the promise of what Scientology says it's going to give you? It's like, even if David Miscavige is beating the shit out of everybody and everyone's on rice and beans and everyone's sleeping on the floor under their desks, small price to pay for unplugging planet Earth from the Matrix. You go, if you got a taste of what it was actually like to be unplugged from the Matrix, how are you bitching about David Miscavige roughing some people up? Maybe the math isn't working out on this. Maybe these people know something I don't know. So that's when I started following all of that very, very closely, and then started secretly getting in touch with some of those people. Because these were people who were famous in Scientology.
Yeah.
Marty Rathbun, Mike Rinder, Tom DeVocht, Debbie Cook. These people were famous in Scientology.
So was there obviously you're reading some of this because you do live in the real world. You're a Scientologist, but you can get access to it. And it's it's giving you a lot of hesitation. But do you remember any one moment where you were like, the Rubicon's crossed, holy shit, at that point?
I never had some sort of a crisis or existential crisis or, oh my God, what does this mean for me? Because for me, I just felt like I'd always been kind of singularly focused on just figuring out how to do my job the best way I could, whether I had buy-in or didn't buy in. It was almost like as a child, I was put on this path and I followed this path and I tried to get as good as what I had to do as possible. And I did believe in a lot of the big aspects of science or the big pieces of the Scientology story, like the prison planet and full operating Thein. And I did believe in those things, but it's almost like I had to convince myself. There were so many times that I had to convince myself why I should still be there and keep doing this thing, even though I really didn't want to. I would have to remind myself, oh yeah, Prison Planet. Oh, that's why we're here. Okay.
Fuck.
I forgot. I forgot. But I had so many times over the years had to convince myself to keep going. And there were certain pieces of the puzzle that if I was like, oh yeah, that's why. But when I finally found out from one of these executives in particular named Dan Kuhn, who worked personally with L. Ron Hubbard, and his job in the Sea Org was to go through everything L. Ron Hubbard had left behind and figure out what needed to be released, what stuff he left behind that had not yet been released and how to release it.
Sorry to hear that. Sounds like an awful job.
Yeah. Out of everyone in Scientology, he's someone I knew would know if there were these upper unreleased OT levels that was basically the magic holy grail that all Scientologists think they're waiting for. He's like, there's nothing. We went through every scrap of paper in every file of every cabinet that L. Ron Hubbard left behind, and We have no idea what is supposed to be on OT 9 and 10.
There's a box of used condoms. We got that.
And for me, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh,
It's bullshit.
that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
I got no crisis whatsoever. None.
Was that meant? Did he end up, as a source, mentioning that for publish in those reports? Like he's telling you, but did the reports ever say that as well?
I don't think the journalists at the time would even care about something that far into the weeds. They care about David Miscavige beating people. They care about people being locked up. They care about torture. They don't care about OT 9 and 10.
I know, but that's basically saying like the whole premise of it is a lie. Like if I were the journalist, I would care about that.
So the people who cared about stuff like that at the time was like the most prominent and recognizable and loudest voices who were those Sea Org members, like Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder.
Yeah.
They were and they each were running their blogs separately at that time, I think. I think Mike had his blog going the same time that Marty did. Do you happen to remember?
Yeah, they had it at the same time.
Yeah. Those are the guys who cared about that kind of stuff and knew that Scientologists would care about that kind of stuff. Because honestly, who cares about that? Scientologists care about that. And so I don't even know. I can't remember as I sit here right now if this information from Dan Kuhn was in a personal conversation or if it was on one of the blogs or both. Because I did meet him later, in real life. But that kind of information for me was like, oh, I never liked getting auditing anyway. I just, as a Scientologist, I never liked getting auditing. I just knew.
Can't imagine why.
It was horrible. I just knew that I was being told auditing was the only path to achieve this thing that was basically required to be unplugged from the matrix. And it was always a problem for me. It's like, damn, I know I got to do that auditing, but I really don't like it. So once I found out that the path was bullshit and, the gold at the end of the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end was just a lie. It doesn't exist.
And that didn't give you like some existential?
Nope. I was like, sweet. I don't have to worry about anything.
Wow. Good for you. I mean, that's great. I'm glad like you didn't have like a crisis of it. But, one of the things I haven't asked you that's kind of the 500-pound elephant in the room here is about some of the pressure, though, that exists. Because people inside Scientology, from what I've heard, witness these things happen. Like when people start to try to leave or stuff like that, they'll put private detectives on them. Or if people are trying to leak things from the outside, they'll pressure them and shit. I mean, I think Mark and I were watching some videos of that he had where guys were coming to do this. Like when you go to contact these executives doing these stories, are you afraid like your phone's tapped or like you're being watched or like you're going to get caught for doing this? Like
I was too naive to be afraid.
Good for you. Yeah.
But I should have been.
Were they watching?
I don't know if you've seen my other chats, but it's hard to talk about this part of the story without getting emotional. And
Take your time.
Okay, so how it went down for me was my mom was the first one to sort of like leave Scientology. But she didn't want to get kicked out of Scientology. She just wanted to sort of fix what was wrong with it. And she eventually got officially kicked out for just running her mouth negatively about David Miscavige to people she should not, from Scientology's perspective, should not have been doing that to, right? Now, in Scientology, when someone gets kicked out, you have to completely sever all ties with them, right? Yeah. So that's called disconnection. So I know I said my mom and I don't have a great relationship right now, but we were very, very close. So realize at this point, it's me and my wife. My wife's parents have been in Scientology forever. My wife's two sisters and brother are in Scientology. Their spouses are in Scientology. All their kids are in Scientology. My little brother's in Scientology. Scientology's everywhere. I work for a Scientologist. She works for a Scientologist. All that kind of stuff. So Scientology tells me that me and my wife and my kids have to disconnect from my mom completely or we're going to get kicked out. So for a couple years, I pretended like I was disconnected from her, but I never really was. And because Scientology has this snitching culture where members just report on each other all the time, I was getting a little careless and lazy about how carefully I was keeping this secret. And I would kind of let things slip to friends of mine who I sort of suspected might also be on the way out to sort of test them. Mm-hmm. And that was, of course, playing with fire. And that's where I got burned. So eventually, people who were supposed to be my friends and even my kids, even my daughters, the nanny, even the Scientologist that we had hired to be the nanny for our daughters is like secretly asking our kids if they still see their grandmother, right? Now, we never told our kids. They were so young at that time. We never said, hey, you're not allowed to tell anyone that you see grandma. Like, we never told them that. Like, how do you even explain to a kid?
You can't.
So eventually, Scientology keeps getting reports that I'm still in touch with my mom. And also, because I'm getting a little lazy here and a little lazy there, they start to figure out that I'm posting on these blogs of Mike and Marty, right? Okay, so eventually they're like, okay, this guy's just going to keep lying to us about being connected to his mom. So they officially kick me out. And so then they go to Heather, my wife, and they go, well, you've got to disconnect from your husband. You have to divorce your husband, and you and the girls have to disconnect from him. And she goes, now you would think that in a normal marriage, you would just be like, why would I ever divorce my husband? But Scientologists don't think that way. Like, relationships are just transactional. So she tried to lay it out to them, and she goes, let me show you why the math doesn't work for me. We have 3 children. Those children love their father. If I divorce him just so I can stay in Scientology, he is still going to have custody of our daughters. Because I'm still connected to him until the girls turn 18, I'm not going to be allowed to do Scientology anyway, because I'll be connected to a suppressive person through our kids. Then the kids will turn 18, and then I will have to give them some sort of an ultimatum of who they're going to be connected with. And they're obviously going to pick the parent who isn't giving them the ultimatum. Yeah. So then not only will I have lost my husband, I will then have lost my kids, and I will not have been able to do Scientology in all this time anyway. So they go, oh, so you're not gonna divorce him? And she's like, no, I'm not gonna divorce him. And they go, okay, you're out. So then they go to her parents, who already have 3 other kids and numerous grandkids. And they go, you guys have to disconnect from your daughter, who is their oldest daughter, right? They have 4 kids, and Heather's their oldest daughter. And they say, you have to disconnect from your daughter and your 3 granddaughters, or you guys are going to get kicked out. And this is really the point where Scientology just gets, when Scientology says, they can leave if they want to. And you go, if they want to. So at that point, Heather's parents are basically just going, which kids and grandkids would we like to never see again? You know? And for what? For what? For nothing, right?
For bullshit.
And so they disconnect. And that was in 2014. And then Heather's father died like maybe 3 years ago or something. And he apparently had cancer for a couple of years. And no one had ever told her. And no one did tell her until he was in the hospital the last 3 days he had to live. And she went to the hospital to see him, and he was very happy to see her. None of her other family members would speak to her or see her at the hospital. And at this time, her parents owned, they didn't live in these houses, but they owned the houses literally across the street from us. And they were like rental properties. And they would do the maintenance on these houses themselves. And so...
Oh, they'd be right there.
Well, when they were over there, because our kids didn't know anything about what was going on. They didn't understand why they weren't going to breakfast at Grandma and Grandpa's every week, right?
Oh, my God.
And so when they would go over there, we would send the kids over and say, go say hi to Grandma and Grandpa. And sometimes they would run into the house and hide from the kids. And sometimes the kids would catch them before they could get into the house. And then what actually happened is
Heather's mother, whenever the kids would actually succeed in like talking to her or seeing her, the mom would go report herself to the ethics officer.
Oh my God.
And because the mom kept self-reporting herself, Scientology told them they had to sell those properties so that they wouldn't see the kids. So they sold the properties. And that was the last time the kids saw their grandparents. And so on my YouTube channel, I will sometimes say, I'm doing this channel just to be David Miscavige's worst nightmare. And I don't pretend like I'm doing it for any reason other than that, even though there's plenty of other benefits and plenty of ways that, you know, people get helped just by everything we're doing on YouTube. But I don't pretend that I'm doing it for any other reason than to be his fucking worst nightmare. Because even when my mom was declared and they were trying to get me to disconnect and I had gotten caught, I said, look, you guys don't understand. If you just leave me alone, I won't say anything bad to anyone. I won't talk to Scientologists and talk shit about David Miscavige or Xenu or any of this shit. I won't try to do Scientology. I'll do my own thing. You guys, if you make me disconnect from her, first of all, she's going to go nuclear and she's going to be your worst enemy. At that time, that's actually what I was saying. Because you can't say, I'll be your worst enemy. That's a threat, and they'll just kick you out right away. I was like, you're going to make her an enemy.
So you could get away with diverting it.
That's right. But then even later, when I was sort of on the verge of being kicked out, I made the same argument. So, like, I already tried everything I could to keep, the family together. And Scientology just refuses to just treat people with any fucking humanity. They just do not care. And honestly, and when I say Scientology, so everything that happens these days in Scientology is a direct reflection of David Miscavige's intention and will. Everything. Yeah. And so when I say Scientology is a destructive cult, I'm talking about just this aspect of how it destroys families who actually love each other. Heather was always so close with her parents and her sisters and her nieces and nephews. Like, the only wedge that drove that family apart was Scientology insisting it had to be that way.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.